The concept of the ark has been sanitized by centuries of traditional storytelling, reduced to a peaceful vessel filled with pairs of animals. But when you peel back the layers of Second Temple literature and the fragments found in the Qumran caves, a disturbing alternative begins to emerge. Some ancient texts suggest the ark was never just a biological lifeboat. Instead, certain interpretations propose it was a highly specialized containment unit designed to transport elements of a world that was supposed to be deleted. This raises a serious question. If the deluge was a divine reset, why did the same anomalies, the same giants, and the same forbidden sciences reappear immediately after the waters receded? A debated theory indicates that the ark carried a genetic leak. We are taught that only 8 souls survived, yet the post-flood world is almost immediately populated by the Rephaim and the Anakimbians of immense stature and questionable origin. Certain scholars have questioned if the ark's cargo included the seed of the Nephilim. The idea isn't that a giant walked onto the boat, but that their genetic blueprint was smuggled inside. Some interpretations suggest that one of the wives of Noah's sons carried a lineage that was never meant to cross the threshold of the new world. This implies that the corruption wasn't external, it was biological. It was already inside the vessel, hidden in the very blood of the survivors. But here's where it gets disturbing. The physical structure of the ark itself defies conventional ancient engineering. The Hebrew word sar, often translated simply as window or roof, is described in rabbinic tradition as a glowing stone that illuminated the interior. Some suggest this wasn't a mere gemstone, but a form of antediluvian technology, a power source from the first world. A theory debated among historians indicates this light was necessary, because the ark wasn't just floating on water, it was navigating a collapsing reality. If the windows of heaven and the fountains of the deep represent a tectonic or even dimensional shift, the ark required more than wood to survive. It required a stabilizer. Certain interpretations of the Dead Sea Scrolls raise the possibility that Noah was instructed to preserve more than just animals. They suggest he was the guardian of the Emerald Tablets or similar records of pre-flood wisdom. This prohibited science included the movements of the stars, the manipulation of metals, and the secrets of longevity. If this knowledge survived, it means the watchers who brought this fire to earth never truly lost their influence. Their curriculum survived the storm. This creates a contradiction. Was the flood a failure, or was the preservation of this knowledge a deliberate, hidden part of the plan? That alone raises a serious question about the figure of Bashan. Ancient whispers in the Targum suggest this giant survived by clinging to the side of the ark or being granted a secret space. While this sounds like myth, certain interpretations propose it as a metaphor for a stowaway element of the old world. Something survived that was not invited. Whether it was a physical being or a spectral influence, the implication is that the ark was breached. The barrier between the holy and the profane was compromised before the boat even touched ground on Ararat. And this is where the theory changes. If the ark was a genomic vault, as some modern researchers propose, the traditional two of every kind narrative takes on a technical meaning. Certain scholars have questioned if the chambers mentioned in Genesis were actually biological storage units. In this view, Noah wasn't a farmer. He was a curator of a DNA bank. But if he was saving the animals, what else was in those vials? Some ancient texts suggest that the spirits of the fallen were desperate to find a host. If the ark carried the remains of Adam, as Eastern traditions indicate, it wasn't out of respect, it was to preserve the original human blueprint against the viral corruption of the Nephilim. But that leads to a darker hypothesis. If the ark was a bridge, it was a bridge for both sides. The preservation of the Watcher's art through Noah's son Ham is a recurring theme in occult history. Some suggest Ham didn't just stumble upon his father's nakedness, he stole something. He stole the garments of skin or the scrolls of the first world. This would explain why the Tower of Babel, a project of immense technological defiance, rose so quickly. The blueprints were on the boat. The very thing that triggered the flood was tucked away in a corner of the ark, waiting for the mud to dry. What if the ark was a chronometer? A debated theory suggests the specific dates of the flood. The 17th day of the second month correlate with a 13th month lunar calendar that no longer exists. This suggests the ark was meant to recalibrate human time. Certain interpretations propose that the vessel was designed to shield its inhabitants from a massive electromagnetic or gravitational shift. If you were inside, you were being recoded, but recoded for what? If the survivors were altered by the Saha's radiation or the ark's internal environment, then every human born after the flood is a different species than the humans born before it. This changes everything. We look at the ark as a symbol of salvation, but some ancient texts suggest it was a transition of control. It was the moment humanity was moved from one system to another, and the cargo it carried ensured that the old controllers would always have a backdoor into our world. This isn't just history, it's a genetic reality that might still be unfolding in your very cells. If the corruption survived the water, then the flood never actually ended, it just went underground. The realization that the ark might have been a containment vessel for forbidden cargo forces a re-examination of the survivors themselves. Some ancient interpretations suggest that the internal hierarchy of the boat was not one of family, but of custody. Certain scholars have questioned the role of the unnamed women on board, specifically the wives of Noah's sons. In the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan, there are hints that the selection process was compromised. If even one individual carried the epigenetic markers of the pre-flood watchers, then the entire purpose of the deluge to purge the earth of celestial human hybridization was bypassed. This creates a disturbing possibility. The flood didn't kill the Nephilim, it simply forced them to evolve into a more covert, human-integrated form. But here's where it gets disturbing. Certain interpretations of Second Temple manuscripts suggest that the chambers within the ark were arranged in a pattern resembling a biological cell or even a temple. A debated theory indicates that the ark was a physical manifestation of a living altar. If the ark carried the physical remains of Adam, as some Eastern traditions propose, it functioned as a biological anchor. It was carrying the original, uncorrupted human template through a sea of chaos. However, some researchers suggest that this original DNA was being targeted. If the something else on the ark was a spiritual or biological pathogen, the boat wasn't just a transport, it was a laboratory. And this is where the theory changes. We have to look at the 7 laws artifacts. Some ancient texts suggest that Noah didn't just receive verbal commands, he was given physical objects, primordial blueprints to stabilize the post-flood reality. These objects were allegedly intended to fix the new laws of physics, such as the appearance of the rainbow, which some suggest was a sign of a new atmospheric density. But if these artifacts were used to tune the new world, who currently holds the frequency? A theory debated among historians indicates that these relics were later hidden, and their presence on the ark was the only reason the vessel didn't succumb to the massive gravitational pressures of the deep. But that alone raises a serious question about the uninvited guests. If Og of Bashan or other entities survived by clinging to the structure, as some rabbinic legends propose, it implies that the ark had blind spots. Certain interpretations suggest these were not physical blind spots, but spiritual ones. The prohibited sciences of the Watchers, astrology, herbalism, and the manipulation of consciousness were carried across the water like a dormant virus. This explains the sudden, unexplained sophistication of the Sumerian and Egyptian civilizations. They didn't invent their knowledge, they unpacked it from the ark's hidden compartments. This leads us to the most provocative theory, the ark as a time capsule for a specific bloodline. Some scholars have questioned why the lineage of Ham was so heavily emphasized and subsequently cursed. A debated theory indicates that Ham discovered the Book of Raziel or similar antediluvian scrolls hidden in the ark's structure. This wasn't just ancient history, it was a manual for regaining the power the Watchers once held. If this knowledge was preserved, then the gods of the ancient world were simply men who had access to the ark's forbidden library. It suggests that the hierarchy of our world today is still based on who inherited the cargo that was never meant to be found. But here's where the escalation becomes personal. If the ark was a genomic vault, and the seed of the Nephilim survived through a genetic backdoor, then the war for human DNA never stopped. Certain interpretations suggest that the flood was just the first system reboot, and we are currently living in a version of reality that is still infected. Some ancient texts suggest that the ark's voyage never truly ended, that the vessel itself became a prototype for how the elite survive global cataclysms while the rest of humanity is purged. This creates a contradiction in our understanding of salvation. Was the ark saving humanity, or was it saving the system that controls humanity? A theory debated among historians indicates that the Tsehar, that mysterious glowing stone, was actually a communication device. If it provided light, what was the source of that light? Some suggest it was connected to a celestial source, keeping Noah in sync with a specific frequency while the rest of the world was disconnected. If you weren't on that frequency, you ceased to exist. But if that frequency was altered to allow certain darker elements to survive, then the world we inherited is fundamentally flawed. We are living in the reconstructed world of Ham's stolen scrolls, not the cleansed world of Noah's prayers. And this is where the theory hits a breaking point. What if the ark didn't land because the water dried up? What if it landed because it reached a specific vibrational coordinate? Certain interpretations of the Dead Sea Scrolls suggest the ark stayed afloat for exactly 364 days, a perfect solar year in the Enochian calendar. This suggests the ark was a machine for resetting time. But if the reset was sabotaged by the cargo it carried, then the time we are living in is a loop. The giants, the forbidden technology, and the celestial interference are all returning because they were never truly gone. They were just waiting in the cargo hold. What are you really part of? If your history is built on a vessel that carried the very things it was supposed to destroy, then your reality is a paradox. Some ancient texts suggest that the signs of the end are just the cargo of the ark finally being fully unpacked in the modern age. The genetic manipulation, the surveillance, and the pursuit of godhood are all legacies of the something else Noah carried. This may not be the full story, but it's the one they never wanted you to investigate. If the flood didn't wash it away, what makes you think you can escape it now? What inside you was preserved in the dark?